and welcome. Today I have several guests on this fantastic panel discussion all about HMO properties. And I'm joined once again by our regulars from the HMO Network, Neil and Matt Baldock. How are you doing, guys?
Very well, David. Nice to see you.
Good morning, nice to see you too. And we've got a couple of guests, people that engage with you at the moment. So we've got Holly Hunt, operations manager at Rooms in Kent, and none other than Darren Brewer from ProPods. How are we all doing?
Morning, guys.
Morning. Yeah, really good, thank you.
I think I'm going to try and sort of open this discussion by sort of tackling what I think is the elephant in the room. It's a discussion that I've had with both Matt and Neil before, but you would be amazed at how many agents you talk to on a day-to-day basis who are fantastic property managers. And if you said to them, hey, will you manage an HMO property? They just say, oh, no, we don't do that. That's a specialist area. We don't touch it. And I think you'd be also forgiven for thinking that HMOs properties sometimes get a little bit of negative press because it's a hang-on from the bad old days when we used to have a lot of kind of student dives and bed sits that weren't the best examples of properties that you could rent. But that has now changed as people have sort of taken control of their own destiny. They're very often after solutions that include bills so that they know what their monthly outgoings are. And these are professional people that are quite happy to rent. And what I'm happy to say, I've done my little bit of research on both of your businesses, Holly and Darren. You both have a similar ethos, and I've pulled several bits out. So, Holly, if you don't mind, I'm going to talk to you first.
Yeah.
What I liked about your website was that you obviously got some key stats there. As soon as you hit that page, you have, and again, I don't know if it's up to date, but even if it's not, this is impressive. 183 happy tenants, 26 tidy homes, and what I loved most was you've got 7 friendly staff. And from the get-go, you have a very clear service promise to those tenants as well, because you have your own kind of in-house test, which is basically, would you like to live there yourself? And if it doesn't pass that test, and presumably you don't deal with it. So just that's a very unique take and completely against the kind of stereotypical vision of that end of the market. Tell us a little bit more about your team and how you do it.
Yeah, so I actually joined the company only about 5 years ago. I come actually from a corporate background. So before this, I was a service manager for AXA Car Insurance in a call centre. So the ethos of everything I do is about customer service. And that is quite a transferable skill when it comes into this. So for me, it wasn't one of the things that I hate, I say I dislike most about estate agencies when they say, oh, my client, and they're referring just to the landlord. Yeah. Because as I see it, I have 2 clients. I do have a landlord, but I have a tenant, and it's my job to bring them both together to make sure I'm making the landlord loads of money, but also on the flip side for that tenant that's parting with their hard-earned cash, that they're getting a quality product out at the end of it. So when we kind of looked at it, we're also owned by 2 people that are HMO landlords themselves, and a lot of the houses that we have are self-owned. So I've come into this in a really lucky situation, I suppose, that I've been taught by 2 HMO landlords that really care. And the Would We Live Here test really does sit at the heart of what we do, because it helps us deal with not only maintenance to make sure that we're dealing with things in the right way, but also the product that we're putting out. And when we're taking on landlords, to make sure that they understand we will happily represent you, but you need to provide the quality product that we expect. Because on the flip side, that's how I'm going to be able to obtain the high rents that you want, and you know the lowest utility costs and spending costs is by making sure that we get this right from the very get-go.
Isn't that such a great sort of business lesson as well, that I think a lot of us arrive at too late in life, is not turning away the business that you know is going to be difficult to manage and to maintain. As property managers, how many times have we taken on stock or properties where you know the landlord hasn't got that commitment to providing a decent quality of accommodation, and therefore your job as a property manager is 10 times more difficult, because you are not only trying to keep a tenant happy, but you're fighting against a landlord that doesn't share that same ethos with you. And I think it's so important that you've got your business set up like that. And I think it's what stands out when I looked at your website. Darren, your properties, your business is based in Portsmouth, and what stood out to me and what I loved most, I'm just going to pick out one word, which I'm going to now add to my vernacular because it was missing before. But you refer to your clients, your tenants, the people that have stayed in your properties as propodians, which I think is fantastic, because you're getting away from obviously treating them like a commodity where they're just a means to an end, but you are welcoming them as part of a community, and genuinely you hope to sort of keep them within that community for life. And I just thought that was also a very unique take, and you're putting the tenant journey and also the landlord journey at the heart of everything that you do. So tell us how you arrived at that.
So, David, hi, good morning. Our propodians, as we call them. So Propod started 5 years ago on a bit of a soul-searching mission from two investors who approached me and said, we want to get into the HMO world. And funny enough, as a letting agent, as I was then, which I've recently just sold my lettings business, I was like, no, I'm not getting, yeah, thank you. I was like, I'm not getting involved in this. I'm not getting involved in HMOs. I'm sorry, I'm just not doing it. I was like, I'm far better than that. And because you have this whole ethos, don't you, of rising damp and, and all that goes with it. And I then stumbled upon a bit of co-living going on in London. But what we decided to do first, and this is how we come to the propodians bit, I decided to create the brand before I had the product. So we knew what our target market was, 21 to 35s. We could see these people, these Generation Z, as we call them, walking down the high street with their Costas and their Starbucks and their Nero cups, because that was a really cool thing to do. And they had earpods on and they're getting on buses with Wi-Fi. And we sort of knew that was our target market. So we had to create the brand. And it took about 6 months for ProPods to actually be formed as a name. And then I was sat there one day with my property manager, Sophie, and the rest of the guys from the creative world who'd done all the social media, and I was like, these are customers. I was like, maybe we should call them something. And I literally sat there and created the word propodian. And we think it's a noun. We're trying to get it in the English dictionary. Applied for it to go into the Oxford School of English Dictionary.
Well, I'm definitely going to add it to my vocab, but I think what's also interesting, and it's just the way that you refer to it on your website. I mean, clearly that market that you've defined as sort of young, modern, so you've got professional, modern, but you refer to co-living, which is an entirely different way to refer to HMO living, if you like. And I guess the experience that people will have in both Holly's properties and your properties is more akin to living in almost like a boutique hotel than it will be in living in a mass marketed slum, if you like. So this is worlds away from that.
I think we've created a niche within a niche, if I'm honest. That's how I see our business. It's not for everyone. Our room rents are strong. Our demand is even stronger. We want these propodians to live comfortable. Our slogan is "Our house, your home." We're never going to please everybody. Let's get one thing straight on the podcast. You're never going to please everybody in the public realm, but we try and do our best. Holly hit on about maintenance and how you look after. I think they're customers more than anything. How you look after your customer. But these are the key. Our recommendations, our referral, are 80%. So we get propodians going to work and telling other potential propodians that they should go and live in a propod house. but we've got some wacky ideas, electric scooters coming into the properties once it becomes law. Can we create an electric hire car club where they can actually take their electric scooter and go and rent the hire car from the, and it's all electric. And so we've got some crazy ideas and VIP nights that we do and monthly house competitions. And, in COVID, we made sure that they had all their food and all their cleaning, et cetera, et cetera. So again, it's a customer base experience.
It's also very much a story of our time, isn't it? In terms of that demographic of people who back in the day would have been encouraged to sort of become homeowners as quickly as they can, for better or for worse. And the worst of it being that they simply cannot afford to get onto the ladder. But there are people who like the flexibility of being able to live in clean, professional accommodation close to work that comes with all the services and customer service as well. And you have a generation of renters that where I think their ideals are going to be more closely aligned with your business model than perhaps any other.
Yeah, and I think I've spoken to Neil about this, and Neil knows I'm very much an advocate of screaming at the government to make HMOs more popular and a policy on it. I think when you look at the young generation of 21s, let's say 21s to 30-year-olds, do they really want to own a house? Probably the answer is no, they don't. Do they want to have flexibility to move from job to job? Yes, they do. Do they want to go and travel? Yes, they do. So why are we trying to squeeze this young generation into home ownership when actually they want to experience life before they actually buy a property? And I think we see more and more of that. I mean, our average tenant travels 80 miles or more to take a job in the city of Portsmouth. The first thing they think about is, when I've got a new job, where am I going to stay? That's the first thing they think of. And what better way than just taking your suitcase and rocking up at a great house and not having to worry about all your bills or, your fridge freezer or who's doing this and who's doing that, and you're surrounded by 6 or 7 other propolians. So you've got friends in a city already before you've even left your front door. It sort of helps mental health as well. I think we noticed that massively over COVID. So yes, I think the product works. I think the brand works. I think the concept works. And I think we're seeing the concept more and more through up and down the country, especially through the HMO network. We're starting to see more and more of this improving standards.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because that's our seamless segue into the next part of our discussion. The reason we're here today is to, in fact, talk about the HMO network. And I think that sometimes within a niche field, and let's face it, this has become a specialism for the agents that do it. It can be a lonely space sometimes if you don't have collaboration, you don't have professional backup, or if there's nobody that you can pick up the phone to and just say, look, this is happening right now. Should it be happening? And how would you handle it? And I'd like to sort of ask you, Holly, where do you find the support that you get there at the HMO network? Where has it been most sort of important?
So we've got the WhatsApp group, which is just really handy to have people at the end of a phone, and also you make these connections with people. So you like LinkedIn for me is something that I never touched maybe until I started. We joined up to the HMO network, and I thought, now's a really good time to start building meaningful connections with people that do what we do and want to raise the bar in doing what we do and share the same ethos that we have. So it's nice just to have pools of people that you can reach out to and say, like you said, we've got this situation, or we're thinking of doing this. What are your thoughts? It's nice just to have that at the end of a phone.
And I'm presuming that if you were going to sort of encourage other agents to join this network, you could also tell them that in terms of how it's benefited your business, does it give you another, because I find this part of my job particularly fascinating. I've been an estate agent for 25 odd years, but a lot of those years I've been locked in my office and never spoke to another agent because I perceive them as a threat to my existence. But this is a refreshing process where you can literally dip in and out of other people's businesses, find out what they're going through. I'm presuming that benefit is the key to it all.
Yeah, I mean, it helps you know where the benchmark is, and I suppose it helps you, all of us, consistently push that. It's a proud thing to have that badge, the HMO Network badge, particularly when we are trying to, have other landlords. It gives them confidence knowing that we're happy to do that kind of market research with other agents. And like you said before, you would be like, oh, I don't really want that agent to know anything about me and what we do because it's a well-guarded secret. But actually there's power in knowledge, and sharing that knowledge and getting everybody to understand that we all have a bar to bring ourselves to. If we can keep it there and push it beyond, then that's something that we should do as a group, to really, like you say, make a better headway and a better name for HMO shared co-living environments.
Excellent. Matt and Neil, I take it you picked me the best of your agents here. But seriously, I think what we can say, obviously, having spoken to Darren and to Holly very briefly now, is that you can already tell from the flavour of that the way they run their businesses is the way that all these businesses should be run. They've got a clear charter, a clear sort of mission in life to make their tenants' lives better, that customer experience in a part of the market that was forever overlooked. And I don't care whether you're a tenant in a normal rented property or an HMO, the experience for tenants traditionally has always been poor because they've been the means to an end. It's how we all get paid, but it was the landlord that paid our bills. So we only refer to the landlord as clients, and as such, the tenants got this second-rate service. I can feel that changing, and clearly you guys passionately believe that. And you've brought here two of the most fantastic examples of these sorts of agents. But the challenge to you guys building a network is, how do you keep a quality of agents in that market? Because not all of them are going to have the same standards. So is there a minimum bar that you expect people to get to, or is there a sort of a target market that you are appealing to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we said from day one of the HMO network, this is it's a proper agency network, and it's for quality agents as well. So when you look at, we've got 17 members now. We could have a lot more if we'd have just taken anybody, but what Holly was saying there about, that's what we want, is people to be proud to be part of the network, it to be a network that actually attracts landlords to want to use the agents within it. And so it's really important to us that we only allow bona fide, quality, knowledgeable agents into the network. So all of our agents have to go through an application process. They've all got to have, all the right accreditations, ombudsman memberships, professional indemnity insurances, client money protection. So they're all actual bona fide agents as well. We did initially get a lot of interest from landlords that wanted to join the network. And whilst Darren, he is a landlord himself, and whilst Rooms in Kent own some of their own properties, that's kind of natural within the HMO world. And then they've developed their businesses into managing for other people as well. But it is an agency network. So it is a network for people with either a large portfolio of self-managed HMOs, or that they're then going out and managing for other people as well. But yeah, it's absolutely 100%. We won't take anybody. It's got a stamp of quality, and we want to keep that.
We also, in the early days, we had some interest from actually a national agency, and they wanted to take quite a few memberships throughout the country. Me and I had that conversation that you often have in business, where we set something up for a reason, then someone comes in with a glut of money and says, yes, we'll buy loads, and you kind of go, yeah. But we thankfully, we stuck to it and said, look, this is the reason we've set this up. It's for quality. Not that you can't have more than one office, but we just don't want some national agent, and we're not going to be able to monitor, the level of work. So we do kind of hand select and pick people, and we approach some people, say, look, we think you're fantastic, we'd love you to be a part of it. And obviously some people coming to us now naturally, because the word is definitely getting out there.
It's funny because I know, Matt particularly, I know that you're quite a passionate sort of campaigner for raising standards in the industry, or maybe just sort of you cut out all the nonsense and you sort of try and stick to the core facts and without getting too sensational. But in the press again today, there's a story in there about Property Mart finally sort of speaking up about the fact that there is we've got a crisis in the private rental sector, appealing to the government to sort of make dispensations when it comes to that second home stamp duty, to remove that, to encourage more investors to come into the market. And the reason for that is that they need more quality accommodation, because simply put, we have it is a crisis brewing, because every agent we speak to, but every agent says, I've got a list of tenants this long, I've got a list of properties that long, and that is a long-term disaster for businesses, but also for the rented sector. And you'd think that HMO properties effectively have the power, if delivered correctly, have the power to deliver serious volume of, I mean, we're talking quality accommodation to a market that is ready and waiting. Darren, you touched on the politics before. Surely something's got to give to make your life easier, and to be able to plug that gap.
Well, it's interesting because Neil and Matt know that I'm actively lobbying government at the moment to stop the council tax on bedrooms in HMOs. And we're actually finally getting somewhere because we've got an amendment within the Levelling Up bill being submitted. But do you know what? I mean, let's have a little bit of a giggle about this. We've had more housing ministers than I've had HMO tenants. So, so there's your problem from day one, isn't it? And well, the problem we got is that I went to the party conference 4 weeks ago, and housing numbers is all about from the top down, according to the government. It's not. It's actually from the bottom up, because unless you lay the foundations, you can't actually build anything. And this is where I think the overall problem comes. I've said to many government ministers and MPs that our HMOs are actually freeing up housing stock of 1 and 2 bedroom flats within that local vicinity of that HMO.
Yeah.
And if you actually look at the Renters Reform Act, I think it's something like 60 pages long. There's not one mention of HMO in it. Not one word. And well, that just says it absolutely in a nutshell of what the government doesn't actually realise. And we believe, as the lobbying group for the council tax as well that I'm part of, we believe that there's nearly 3 million sharers within the UK living in HMOs. And when you think about it, there's only 11 million renters in the UK. Well, all of a sudden, that's 30% of those renters that are actually living in shared accommodation, but yet the government doesn't want to actually talk about that. So I think this is where the HMO network could potentially come into its own league sort of thing, because Neil especially and I have spoken about how do we push forward the network, and actually how do we get legislation and policy, and how do we get, well, I always say, how do you get a seat at the table? How do you get the seat at the table with the government?
And it's very often it's going to be persistence and being that sort of, I imagine, that pain in the backside that never goes away until they sort of sit up and listen. And I think that's the key to effective lobbying is that persistence, but also showing them examples of the work that you're doing. And I think really it's really interesting to talk to the 4 of you today, because you all passionately believe in providing quality accommodation. Our government and previous governments have got an image of your end of the market, and that's the way I say it, because that's the way that they say it. It's the end of the market. They have a negative view of the HMO space, which is why when they brought in the regulation around HMOs, they're trying effectively to tackle what they would call rogue landlords or slum landlords, or whatever you wish to put on it. And I know, particularly locally to me, I know of one local council that is saying, look, we're not going to allow any more HMOs in this area because we do not want to increase our exposure in terms of housing benefit, because it's not necessarily associated with professional bill-paying tenants. It is instead associated with the other end of the market. And networks like yourselves, if you are lobbying government, it's essential that that voice comes through clearly and loudly, that this isn't necessarily representative of the whole of the market.
Can I just say also, I think we've seen some horrendous things in the news over the last few days with the immigration going on and the immigration centre fire. But what's clear is that we have a lot of people living in hotels. I read an article yesterday that there's families living in hotels on motorways and having to take their kids 50 miles to school because they're in temporary accommodation. This has got to stop. You know, we've got to reset the button on housing, and we've also got to reset the button on actually what is a rogue landlord. Yeah, because the government is trying to sort out 5% of rogue landlords when the other 95% of landlords are actually doing a decent job. You know, I was at the conference the other week, and I made a comment that actually we're not landlords, we're private rental providers, and we're actually PRPs. You know, and maybe we should be called private rental providers, because that's a far nicer word in the private rental sector than being called a landlord.
Yeah.
So I think there's a place for everything. I think HMOs have a place in the market, whether that's the low end of the market or the high end of the market. We need all. It's no different to buying a cheap car and a dear car. Everyone has a budget and everyone has to fit into that. And I think that's how the government needs to look at housing and how we provide better housing. Yeah, I'm a keen advocate of it, to be honest with you. And I'm keener and keener every day to get my voice heard within government, because I think the more of us that talk and actually say to the government, you've got this wrong and you need to reset the button, is the quicker that this problem gets resolved.
Well, I admire you, because lobbying housing ministers is a little bit like speed dating recently. You need to get in there really quick and hope that they leave notes for the next person that takes over the job. Holly, do you think that, you know, when you look at sort of the political landscape in terms of how it affects our industry in terms of legislation and taxation and all the sort of different things that are thrown at us, there's no real reason, is there, that it shouldn't be a government priority to provide a decent level of housing? Surely that is the very minimum that we'd expect.
Yeah, and a lot of it is about having a good relationship as well. I think with your local council and your HMO officers, we've got a really great relationship with our ones, and they really they're big advocates for what we do, which makes our job really easy. But exactly like Darren was saying, I think the way that the world is at the moment, we're seeing a change in our demographic. So we had people that initially were what Darren was saying, sort of your young 20-year-old digital nomads, but that's changing. I'm getting people that are nearing retirement age that don't want to have the massive overheads of having, you know, having to pay bills and work out, you know, budgeting money. They're now moving out of these properties into these sort of larger luxury rooms. They get an inbuilt family, which is something that you know, they're not necessarily had before, and they know where their bills are. So the need for housing, you've got people freeing up, like Darren said, these kind of studio 1-bed, 2-bed properties that could be used for families. And we're seeing people that, you know, single living, that are living in 2-bed flats moving to us, and that's almost a bit of a norm now.
It's super interesting that you say that, because I went to value a house for an elderly gentleman. He must have been sort of nearing 70. Lived in this house. It was a 4-bedroom house, and when you sort of go through the reasons why people are selling, he says, look, I've found a room, it's all bills included, it's in town, there's a bit more life there, there are young people living there as well, so I get to talk to more people. I don't need a 4-bedroom house. This really should be with a family. And I sort of asked the question, well, you know, you're coming off the ladder effectively, which we've always drummed into people is the wrong thing to do. I said, do you worry about sort of going from home ownership to actually renting a property? And he sort of looked at me like I was absolutely daft, and he said, well, effectively, you're just renting your property from the bank anyway when you've got a mortgage. He said, so there'd be no change for me. And that's an interesting way to look at it, because you've got a generation of people who can pocket some money to live out the rest of their life and also have a really good standard of living, and perhaps give them a new sort of support network, a lease of life in terms of the people that they come into contact with. And so I think it's a whole new way of looking at things.
And I think more that's the key, really. More people need to look at that, because so even if you bring that from government just to other agents that are kind of turning their nose up at HMOs, you know, one thing that both Darren and Holly have both said is it's not, people aren't just renting rooms from an affordability point of view. It's actually a lifestyle choice. There is a demand for it. And as you say, David, I mean, I'll be polite and say we're the same generation, although we've got a few years on me, I'm sure. It's drilled into us, home ownership. And and agents themselves will think everybody wants to own a home, but they don't anymore. And people want this. We term it all-inclusive living. There's a real demand for it. And so I think agents need to understand it. People aren't just doing it because they can't afford to rent it. Actually, sometimes they've got more disposable income than others. It's just this is their lifestyle choice, and so it needs to be accommodated for.
Yeah, and I think as with everything in life, you always get your early adopters, don't you? And then people sort of start following that curve as they go. And I've always said, I always look back, David, when me and Matt first started out in estate agency, 20 odd years ago, maybe slightly longer than that, people would turn their nose up at lettings. And so it was all agents just wanted to be sales. That was the sexy bit.
Yeah.
And you would literally sort of just say to a landlord coming in the office, yeah, lettings is up the back, and that was it. And now every agent rolls out the red carpet for the landlords, because obviously a lettings part of their business is the valuable piece. And I do believe, give it another 5 years or so, agents will cotton on to the fact that HMOs and co-living and shared living is not going anywhere. It's part of the future. It's part of the way people like to live for all the various reasons that everybody is sharing. And so it is actually a good income stream for an estate agency, letting agency, landlord investor business to have. And we have got a much more transient lifestyle now as well, with people being able to work from anywhere in the country in a lot of circumstances. And the shared living gives them that flexibility of moving to a different town and getting, like Darren said, meeting some people and getting set up very quickly and established in an area sort of very quickly. And people do like that. It is a lifestyle choice.
So, I mean, I made an assumption at the beginning of this. I think I said that, HMO management has become a real specialism. And I know that's what your businesses focus on. But is it for every agent? I mean, would you recommend that agents that are never going to be cut out for it? Effectively, the question being, do you need to be a specialist to get into HMO management properly?
Well, I believe you do need to be a specialist, yeah. So I don't think, we are seeing in our town, particularly, there's one sort of corporate agent starting to do it, and they just can't do it. When we go and look at their properties, you can see the difference, because they don't know, they treat them like a normal buy-to-let. And if you only inspect an HMO once every 3 months, of course, you're in for a little bit of a problem, because you've got 6, 7, however many people living in it. They need management, they need hands-on management, and they need people that know what they're doing. So no, I don't think it's something for everybody to get into. But I think if you are going to get into it, then you need, you shouldn't be managing one HMO. You need to get into this as a specialism and at scale, really.
So when I asked you that question, I could see both Darren and Holly nodding their heads. Is there anything that you two want to add to that, or as Neil said it all?
Holly, I'll go first, shall I? Sorry.
Yeah, buddy.
I probably speak with a bit more of experience here, not being rude, because I've obviously just sold my lettings business. So, and before we started ProPods, we didn't manage one HMO at all, on the basis of that I didn't feel that we were geared up to actually do that. But I think with the legislation around HMOs and the obvious things that can happen with being fined, et cetera, as a landlord and an agent, I think you have got to be specialised in this field, and you've got to have the right systems in place, and you've got to have the right network around you. You've got to have people who know what's going on around you, so you can pull in on those experiences, which sort of comes back to the HMO network. But yeah, look, it's a learning curve, and I think if you've got your own HMO, I have a saying that if you don't have skin in the game, you can't come to the table. And I think, when you've got skin in the game and you're managing maybe portfolio and you've also got your own sort of HMO, I think you see it from both sides, as a customer experience and the landlord experience.
I think that's the secret sauce in the best lettings businesses that I've spoken to, is the fact that they're run by people that have skin in the game, that know what it's like to own and manage those properties themselves. And if they hopefully they want to experience a great experience, and they then make sure that their customer base benefits from their own real life experience. And I think if you're with a managing agent, feel free to ask them whether or not, you know, the people behind that business have any hands-on experience in that way. And I think that sort of separates people who just think it might be a good earner to people who have actually kind of come through it the hard way, I suppose.
I think you're right. I think you're exactly right. I'm sure the rest of the guys on this talk agree that you're right as well. Can I just come back though to something interestingly? We're actually, I can't say too much, we're actually launching a new product for the over 55s soon, because we see that as a massive market. We see the retirement market, or the over 55s. People actually want to be part of a community. We see that's key. I think what's interesting is that we've decided to put all our business into high streets up and down the south coast. So we're not going into residential streets anymore. We're going into that high street. So because we think that people want that need and they want that community feel, and we think that the local high streets will give them that. So I think we're seeing co-living really expand. And let's be honest, 25 years ago, we saw it on our TV screens with Friends, you know, Ross, Joey, Chandler, Phoebe, you know, they were probably the original HMO. And we were watching it along with everyone else in America and England, or however many other countries, not actually realizing that co-living was actually being created in front of us.
You've touched on something really interesting there, because really you're talking about the equity release crowd, and we have a growing sort of pension problem in every young population, whereby we're going to get to an age where none of us are going to be able to draw down what we want, and you get to a point in later life, and I experienced this with my own family members, where you just simply run out of cash for day-to-day stuff, and you cannot pick a brick out of the wall going, okay, I've got equity here you go, this will pay for my bills for the next month. And people end up making very difficult decisions to free up cash. But what do they then do? And my mum, she'll forgive me for saying that, she watches all my stuff. She's no spring chicken, but she is now in a rented property, and I would say much happier with other people around her, and not feeling as isolated. And I don't need to go and visit her that often, so that's great.
Also, just really quickly there, you just got a taste of the HMO network. So this is, I'm just sitting here, you know, realistically, you know, the HMO network is Neil's baby. As you know, I turn up to look pretty on a lot of these things. But like, you know, unless you were watching one podcast and you got to have some of Darren's and Holly's experience to hear these ideas once in a blue moon. But by being part of the network, we all get to hear these ideas. And as Holly said at the very start, we kind of push each other to raise the bar. So like, I'm already messaging Neil going, do we need to get some electric scooters? You know, and it's just, and that's the way that's the way that the industry evolves. As you said, David, I do it a lot on the sales side. Let's all talk about good ideas and all steal each other's good ideas, because if we raise the standards, we raise the fees, and everyone has a better life. And I just think, you know, this has been a real small snippet of the value you can get from being part of a network like ours.
I think it's superb, and it's great to sort of hear it from two agents who clearly put that sort of customer experience at the heart of it. I'm sure your landlords are getting as good a service as the tenants sound like they're getting as well. And you're coming away from looking at tenants as sort of a one-hit wonder. Maybe people actually that you nurture through life as they sort of progress into sort of different areas and different properties. Has your businesses, in terms of their evolution, have you met returning customers? Have you had people that have rented for you more than once?
Yeah, we get it loads. In fact, I've had 2 back this week to say that unfortunately they've had failed relationships and can we come back, please? I suppose the heart of what we do is all about community, because you live in a communal space, you work with a communal group of tenants. I'm really proud that I look after nearly 200 tenants. I know every single one of their names. I know what everybody does for a living, and they see me most weeks because I'm in and around most of my houses. And that really does touch on the kind of why I believe that if you are going to get yourself into HMOs, you really do need to go with an agent that is specialist, because like Neil said, you can't just flick into a property every 3 months and then move out and then think that that's okay. You've got lots of people living in houses. But outside of people referring people to us. So we work, a lot of our houses in a particular location are quite close to a hospital. We get loads of NHS workers come to us that only want to rent with us, even though there are other providers in this town and we don't necessarily have the stock availability. They're happy to sit and wait to get one of our properties because they have had such a good, or a friend of theirs or a colleague has had such a good experience with what we've done, that they only want to rent with us, which is really flattering. And to have so many tenants, you know, come back to us. Our longest standing tenant has lived with us for nearly 11 years. I've got tenants, you know, that's a long time.
It is a long time, yeah.
There's a reason why that is, because he knows he gets looked after. He lives with a family of other, you know, longer standing tenants, and they're getting a quality product from us, and they know that they'll be well looked after. And we've got a really great relationship with those. So yeah, it's the heart of what we do is community. And I think if you can get that right, you will have returning customers, because people's lives change. And they will always want to come back to something that they know. And if it's good, then you're always in with a sure bet.
I'm getting that buzz again that I get when I'm instantly now proud to be part of an industry where we put that kind of, you know, community at its heart, and we've changed. Yeah, these conversations never used to happen 10 years ago because that ethos just wasn't there. And truthfully, this is the you know, some of the best examples of what we're capable of when we all get together and collaborate. We have left. Yeah, well, go on. Sorry,
I was going to say, but I think what you're also seeing is because rents are increasing, and this isn't a problem for me, because rents are increasing, the customer demand wants better. You know, so
value for money.
Value for money completely. And I actually think it's dragged the industry up, if I'm honest. It's interesting, isn't it? Because we see estate agents still charging 0.5%, 0.75% to sell a house. And yet in the likes of the US, you won't see an agent sell a house for less than 2 to 3%. What we're seeing with the letting industry, I'm seeing less and less agents saying, I'll do it for 5, I'll do it for 6, I'll do it for 7. You know, and I think with HMOs now, we're starting to see HMO agents saying actually it's 12 or 15%, because if you want the quality and you want the service and you want the longevity of your tenants to stay, then you need a specialized agent who's going to do that. So I think what we've got to be careful of is that we don't sell the market short. And as agents, we actually are proud of what we do. And this is what frustrates me with the government, that actually don't talk to the big companies, don't talk to the build to rent sector, talk to the independents who are on the ground doing it day in, day out and know what's going on. Because that is how you resolve coming back to that housing crisis, because it's a lot of little problems that create the big solution.
I think that's the right way to look at it. But if we were to tip this on its head, because we've now concentrated a lot on sort of how the tenant's experience is different. Let's talk about landlords, because the HMO market presumably is still one of the only pockets of the rental market where, if you manage it correctly and you run a tight ship, you can provide quality accommodation, you can get a decent rent level, but you're also making a better than average return compared to the rest of the market. That doesn't get spoken enough about, does it?
No, we've had quite a few conversations like that recently. Where we're based, you know, the yields of the standard let aren't fantastic. So I'm having conversations with people say, "Oh, I've heard if you go up and buy up in the north somewhere, you can get 10% return." And I'm saying, "Yeah, but the house never goes up in value, you know, in certain parts." And it's not. There's companies that will sell you these schemes. So we do say, "Have you looked at HMOs?" And we've actually just sold. We've got a multi-landlord with single lets, and he's just buying his first HMO through us. But we will, on the basis that we're going to manage it, because he knows we're the experts in doing that. So it is something that normal landlords, if you like, are starting to want to talk about more. But again, it is a re-education piece, because you have to explain to them that there's obviously big differences, but you know, it has to be looked after. And I think if we ever had a let-only landlord say, "I'm thinking about buying HMO and managing it myself," with 100% kind of shy away from that. You can't.
Yeah. Because you can't guarantee continuity of service, where it's your face at the front, their service backing it up. And if you've got no say over the delivery of that, it can be a very, very different thing, and can at the end of the day reflect badly on a business. But I'd like to thank you all. I know you're really busy and you've taken time out to talk to us today about the HMO network and your experiences. It was a very fascinating discussion, and I highly recommend any agent that is contemplating expanding their HMO management business, or they feel like they've been left out in the cold and they want to speak to other like-minded agents. You can see the sort of caliber of people that they're dealing with, but definitely get to know Matt and Neil, because they are a wealth of knowledge, and they're a friendly bunch as well, you know. So well,
most of the time.
thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.